Imagine your name is known by every person on the planet. Children learn it in school. It appears in movies, books, songs. Your face is on posters and t-shirts. People use your name as a synonym for genius. And yet, almost nobody knows who you actually were. Not the real you. Not the boy who didn't speak until he was 3. Not the student his teachers gave up on. Not the man who worked a boring office job while the greatest ideas of the century were forming quietly in his head. This is not the Einstein you think you know. This is the real one. You are with me on Custom Stories in English. Make yourself comfortable and let the Einstein story begin. Let's go back to the beginning. Germany, 1879. A small city called Ulm. A Jewish family. A baby boy is born. They name him Albert. And almost immediately, something seems wrong. Albert does not speak. Not at 1-year-old. Not at 2. His parents begin to worry. His family whispers. The doctors have no clear answer. Finally, at 3 years old, he begins to say his first words. But even then, something is different. He speaks slowly, carefully, as if he is testing each word before releasing it into the world. His sister later remembered that he would whisper sentences quietly to himself before saying them out loud, practicing, checking, making sure they were exactly right. His parents thought something was wrong with him. His teachers agreed. In school, young Albert was a problem, not because he was loud or disruptive, but because he asked too many questions. He wanted to know why, always why. Why does this work this way? Why does that rule exist? Who decided this was true? Teachers in 19th century Germany did not want why. They wanted silence, obedience, and memorization. Albert could not give them that. And so the school decided Albert was the problem. One teacher told him directly, "You will never amount to anything." Think about that for a moment. A teacher looked at the young Albert Einstein and saw nothing worth believing in. But something happened when Albert was 5 years old that changed everything. Quietly, invisibly, in the way that the most important moments often do. He was sick in bed. His father brought him a small gift to pass the time. A compass. Albert held it in his hands and noticed something that most children would ignore completely. No matter which way he turned the compass, no matter how he moved it or tilted it, the needle always pointed the same direction, always north. Something invisible was reaching through empty space and moving that needle. He later said that this moment gave him a feeling he never forgot, a deep, almost physical sense that there were invisible forces in the universe waiting to be understood, that behind the world you could see, there was another world, hidden, mysterious, governed by rules that nobody had fully written down yet. He decided at 5 years old that he wanted to find those rules. The school could not see it. The teachers could not see it. But inside that quiet, strange, question-asking boy, something extraordinary was already growing. Albert was 16 when he made his first great mistake. He dropped out of school. Not because he was lazy, not because he didn't care, but because the school, a rigid military-style German gymnasium, was suffocating him. The memorization, the discipline, the complete absence of curiosity. He couldn't breathe there, so he left. His plan was simple. He would follow his family to Italy, spend some time thinking, and then apply to the Swiss Federal Polytechnic in Zurich, one of the best technical universities in Europe. He applied. He was 17. The minimum age was 18. He failed the entrance exam anyway. Not in physics and mathematics, those he passed easily, brilliantly, but in French and botany, the subjects that had nothing to do with the invisible forces he had been thinking about since he was 5 years old. He failed completely. Most people would have given up. Albert tried again the following year. This time he was accepted. University should have been his moment. Finally, people who thought like him. Questions that mattered. But even here, something was off. He skipped lectures. He read what he wanted instead of what was required. He borrowed his classmates' notes before exams and memorized them at the last minute. His professors were not impressed. One of them, Hermann Minkowski, called him a lazy dog. The same Hermann Minkowski who would later use Einstein's work to build the mathematical framework of space-time. When Albert graduated in 1900, he applied for every academic position he could find. Assistant professor, research position, laboratory job, anything. Nobody wanted him. Every single application was rejected. Former classmates got positions. Former professors helped their favorite students. Albert, the strange one, the difficult one, the one who never showed up to lectures, got nothing. For 2 years he struggled, giving private tutoring lessons to earn money, moving from place to place, writing letters that went unanswered. And then a friend's father helped him get a job at a patent office in Bern, Switzerland. He was a technical expert, 3rd class. His job was to read patent applications, inventions submitted by ordinary people, and evaluate whether they were original, practical, and well described. 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. It was, by every conventional measure, a dead end. And it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because the patent office gave Albert something universities never had. Time. Quiet. A steady salary. And a mind that finished its work quickly and then had hours of uninterrupted space to think. He thought about light, about time, about what it would feel like to ride alongside a beam of light through space, about clocks, about trains, about the nature of reality itself. And in 1905, while still working full-time at the patent office, Albert Einstein published 4 scientific papers. 4 in 1 year. Each one would have been enough to make a scientist's career. Together, they were something that had never happened before in the history of physics. The first paper explained the photoelectric effect, proving that light behaves as both a wave and a particle. This would eventually win him the Nobel Prize. The second explained Brownian motion, the random movement of particles in liquid, proving once and for all that atoms actually exist. The third introduced the special theory of relativity, rewriting the relationship between space and time that Newton had described 200 years earlier. And the fourth, the shortest paper, barely 3 pages, contained the most famous equation in human history. E equals mc squared. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. 4 words and a number that said something almost impossible to believe: that matter and energy are the same thing. That inside every object, every atom, every particle of dust floating in a sunbeam, there is an almost incomprehensible amount of energy waiting to be released. He was 26 years old. He was a third-class clerk in a patent office. He had been rejected by every academic institution he had approached. And in 12 months, he had changed our understanding of the universe forever. There is a photograph of Einstein taken in 1921. He is standing on a ship arriving in New York for the first time, and the dock is packed with people: journalists, photographers, crowds pushing against each other just to catch a glimpse of him, police holding the line. He looks in that photograph slightly confused, like a man who expected to talk about physics and found a parade instead. This was the new Einstein, not the patent clerk, not the failed applicant, not the strange, quiet boy who whispered sentences to himself before speaking them out loud. This was Einstein the celebrity, Einstein the icon, Einstein the name that meant something even to people who had never opened a physics textbook in their lives. But before all of that, before the fame, before the Nobel Prize, before the T-shirts and the posters, there is a story that almost nobody tells. The story of Mileva. Her full name was Mileva Marić. She was Serbian. She was brilliant. And she was one of the only women in Europe at the time studying theoretical physics at a serious level. They met at the Polytechnic in Zurich, 2 young people who thought about the same things, who stayed up late arguing about the same problems, who understood each other in the way that only 2 people who share an obsession can truly understand each other. They fell in love. They wrote letters to each other, filled with physics equations and tenderness in equal measure. Albert called her his little witch, his equal, his partner in the great project of understanding the universe. Historians have argued for decades about how much Mileva contributed to his work. Some believe she was a full collaborator, that the ideas in those 4 papers of 1905 were built from conversations between them, from arguments and corrections and late-night thinking done together. Others say she was more supporter than co-author. The truth is impossible to know with certainty now. The letters exist. The closeness was real. The contribution, exactly how much, exactly in what form, remains one of the quiet mysteries of science history. What we do know is this: they had a daughter before they were married, a fact Einstein hid for most of his life. The daughter, named Liesel, disappeared from history. Nobody knows what happened to her. She was given away, possibly adopted. She was never spoken of publicly. They married in 1903. They had 2 sons. And then, slowly, as Einstein became more famous, as the lectures and the travel and the correspondence consumed him, something broke between them. By the time Einstein received his Nobel Prize in 1921, he and Mileva had been separated for years. He had already begun a relationship with his cousin Elsa. He had already, in one of the stranger moments in the history of marriage negotiations, offered Mileva a written contract, rules for living together that read more like office policy than love. She refused. They divorced. He gave her the Nobel Prize money, every bit of it. Whether that was guilt or generosity, probably both, only Einstein knew. The Nobel Prize itself was almost absurdly late. By 1921, the scientific world had understood for over a decade that Einstein had changed physics forever. The delay was politics, personal feuds, and a committee that couldn't quite agree on which of his ideas to honor. In the end, they gave it to him not for relativity, which was considered too theoretical, too strange, too difficult to verify, but for the photoelectric effect. The first of the 4 papers from 1905. He was already famous when he received it. The prize confirmed what the world already knew. He was the greatest scientist alive, possibly the greatest scientist who had ever lived. And he was not entirely sure what to do with that. There is a letter dated August 2nd, 1939. It begins like this. Some recent work leads me to expect that the element uranium may be turned into a new and important source of energy. The letter is addressed to Franklin D. Roosevelt, President of the United States. It was written by Albert Einstein. Or rather, it was signed by Albert Einstein. The actual drafting was done largely by a physicist named Leo Szilard, who understood exactly what was happening in the laboratories of Nazi Germany and was terrified. He needed a name powerful enough to make a president stop and listen. There was only one name like that in the world. He went to Einstein. He explained what the German physicists were working on. He explained what was possible. He explained what it would mean if the wrong people built it first. Einstein understood immediately. He signed the letter. The Manhattan Project began, and 6 years later, on August 6, 1945, a bomb fell on Hiroshima. Einstein heard the news on the radio, like everyone else. He had not been part of the project. The American government, ironically, considered him a security risk, too political, too outspoken, possibly a sympathizer with foreign elements. The man whose equation had made the bomb theoretically possible was not trusted to help build it. He sat with the news in silence. Then he said, in German, 2 words. Oy vey. It is almost too small a response for something so enormous. But perhaps that is exactly right. Some moments are too large for any words to contain. You sit with them. You carry them. For the rest of his life, Einstein spoke about the bomb. He joined organizations dedicated to nuclear disarmament. He wrote letters, signed petitions, gave interviews. He said, more than once, that signing that letter to Roosevelt was the greatest mistake of his life. He understood the terrible irony completely. He had spent his life believing that understanding the universe was a pure thing, that knowledge by nature was good, that the equations were innocent. And then the equations built a weapon that killed 200,000 people in 2 days. He never fully forgave himself. There is a version of Einstein that history sometimes presents: the cheerful genius, the wild hair, the bicycle, the tongue sticking out, a gentle grandfather of science. That man existed, but he carried something with him that the photographs don't show. The knowledge of what a pure idea in the wrong hands at the wrong moment in history can become. Einstein arrived in the United States in 1933. He was 54 years old. He left Europe on a ship, and while he was at sea, the Nazis entered his apartment in Berlin and searched it. They confiscated his sailboat. They put a price on his head, literally, in a Nazi publication that listed "enemies of the state." Next to Einstein's photograph, they printed a caption, "Not yet hanged." He never went back to Europe. America gave him Princeton, a position at the Institute for Advanced Study, a house on Mercer Street, a salary, safety. He lived there quietly by the standards of a man whose face was known everywhere on earth. He walked to work, he played violin, he sailed on weekends. He worked on what he called his unified field theory, a lifelong attempt to find a single set of equations that could describe all the forces of the universe together. Gravity, electromagnetism, everything. He never finished it. Some physicists today still believe it cannot be done. Others believe it is the only question in physics worth asking. But America was not entirely peaceful either. In the late 1940s and early 1950s, a senator named Joseph McCarthy began a campaign that would come to define an era. Communists were everywhere, McCarthy insisted, in the government, in Hollywood, in the universities, in the laboratories. Einstein was investigated by the FBI. Files were opened. Letters were read. Informants were asked about him. The file the FBI eventually compiled on Albert Einstein ran to over 1,800 pages. They called him a communist sympathizer, a dangerous foreign influence, a threat. Einstein responded the way Einstein always responded, directly, without fear, and often with a dry humor that was more devastating than anger. He told the journalist that if he had known what America would become in those years, he might have become a watchmaker instead of a physicist. He spoke in support of civil rights. He wrote letters defending academics who had been blacklisted. He was, in the estimation of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, a problem. He was also, in the estimation of the rest of the world, simply himself. In April 1955, Einstein was asked to sign a document, the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, a statement calling on world leaders to seek peaceful solutions in the nuclear age. He signed it. 11 days later, he was gone. He died in his sleep at Princeton Hospital early in the morning of April 18, 1955. He was 76 years old. His last words, spoken in German to a nurse who did not speak German, were not recorded. Nobody knows what he said. After he died, a pathologist named Thomas Harvey performed the autopsy, and then, without permission, without authorization, without asking anyone, Harvey removed Einstein's brain and took it home. He kept it for 40 years, in jars, in a cider box under a beer cooler in his office. He sliced portions of it and sent them to researchers around the world who requested samples. The brain traveled across America in the trunk of Harvey's car. It appeared in magazine articles and scientific papers, and eventually a book. Whether the examination of Einstein's brain revealed anything meaningful about the nature of genius is still debated. The studies found some differences, regions that were unusually developed, proportions that were slightly different from average. What that means, if it means anything at all, remains unclear.
Genius, it turns out, does not announce itself cleanly in the structure of tissue. It announces itself in a 5-year-old boy holding a compass in his hands, feeling the needle pull toward north, and deciding that he absolutely has to understand why.
So here is what I want you to hold from this story. A boy who didn't speak until he was 3. A student his teachers gave up on. A man rejected by every university he applied to, who spent his days reading patent applications for other people's inventions. And in 1 year, one ordinary year, at an ordinary desk, in an ordinary town, he changed what human beings understand about reality itself. The world told Einstein in 100 different ways that he was not the right person, that he was too slow, too strange, too difficult, too late, too foreign, too dangerous. He simply didn't believe them. Not because he was arrogant, not because he was certain of success, but because the questions were too interesting to stop asking. The compass needle was still pointing north, and he still needed to know why. That is the thing about genuine curiosity. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need the right institution or the right credentials or the right moment. It just keeps asking. And sometimes, if you are patient enough, if you are stubborn enough, if you go back to the work every single day, the universe answers. You are with me on Custom Stories in English. Keep asking your questions. Keep going back to the work. Your answer is coming.